We've been talking a lot about generator objects thus far and how they can help us generate geometry based off of existing objects like splines. But in this video, I want to introduce you to a different type of object that is just as useful as generators, and those objects are called deformers. Now, deformers are very aptly named. They help you deform existing geometry, and these deformers can be very helpful for animating and also modeling. So let me just dive into Cinema 4D and show you how deformers work. So here we are at Cinema 4D. Let me go and just grab a capsule here, make it a little bit smaller. And what this capsule is going to be is an arm for my CPU boy here, because I cannot help myself but take an inanimate object and apply arms and legs and a face to them and animate them and turn them into a character. It's just my thing. But we're going to make some very simple arms for this character, and we'll make it, wave or, bend the arms and all that kind of stuff. So let's go back into our other project here with our capsule. And I just want to make two distinctions here. Number one, how deformers work and how they compare and contrast to generator objects. So if you remember, generator objects, for them to act upon a piece of geometry, you need to feed that geometry into as a child of that generator object here. So if I go to display, garage shading with lines, you'll see that just subdivided our object. And that's by making that object a child of the generator. Now, deformers you'll find right here. If I click and hold, it's represented by this little bend icon, and you see all the types of deformers we have here. Some make sense right away as to what they do. We got twist, taper, bulge, shear, bend. Some of these things, like what is a delta mush? I don't know. Look it up on the help there. Squash and stretch, jiggle's very fun. Look that up in the help menu. But what we're going to do is we're going to bend this capsule. And so I'm going to add that to the scene. And you're going to see that with the bend deformer and a lot of different deformers, they have this kind of bounding box situation going on here where we have two arrows. And one arrow is kind of pointing in the direction it's going to bend, and one is like the angle in which the bend is going to happen. Okay. Now, how do we get this bend deformer to act upon the capsule? You would think, oh, well, would you just feed the capsule into the bend deformer? Nope, that's not how that works. How we can get a bend deformer to act upon a piece of geometry is actually by making the deformer a child of the capsule here. Now, there's one other distinction here, and let me actually just show you really quickly. Just bring up the strength of the bend here really quickly, and you can see we got some bending going on. I can hit T for scale this down, and so you can see when you bend, you can actually see that helpful bounding box of that arrow telling you which way that's going to bend. In the old days of Cinema 4D, you did not have this, and it was kind of a guessing game as to which direction you were bending things. But these arrows are very, very helpful in the little HUD here. But we have this, bent capsule here. Now that all seems very straightforward, but gets a little bit more complex because a deformer can also deform a object if it's in the same level of hierarchy as said object. So if I go and I move this bend deformer outside of the capsule, or unchild it, I guess it's unchilding a thing. So I'm just going to take the bend deformer, remove it as a child. That's probably the term. Remove it as a child from the capsule, and you'll see that it's still acting upon the capsule. But the only problem is the subdivision surface is not acting upon the capsule. And that's because the subdivision surface is only going to act upon the very first object in that hierarchy. So we can get around this two ways. We can bring the bend deformer second in the list. So its subdivision surface is going to act upon the capsule, and then the bend deformer is actually going to bend the result of the capsule after it's subdivided. Okay. And so what we can also do is group these together, Alt G, and you'll see that now it doesn't matter where the bend deformer is in that list, because the subdivision surface is going to subdivide anything underneath this null. So even if we had two capsules here, it's going to subdivide them both. Okay. So this is a very easy way if you are modeling different objects, you want to apply one subdivision surface versus two subdivision surface on multiple objects. This is one way to do it. But anyways, let's just do this the traditional way, which is just applying that deformer as a child, and you can see what's going on there. Now, let's go to the bend deformer options, and you can see the strength here, and you can see that it's kind of stretching our geometry here. If we want that to keep length and not stretch, we'll check this option on. You can see that it's going to maintain the length, and you can see we got this little, wavy noodly arm here. Now, the angle is this second arrow here. So this angle on the top is which direction it's going to be bending. This angle, or that bottom arrow, is the direction in which that bend will be pointing towards. So these both make a lot of sense here, okay? But if I go, and let's just say you have an object that isn't facing upwards. So if I turn the bend deformer off, and I go and I change the orientation to positive X. Okay, so you have an object laying down. And if I select this object and I go to my menu here, and I want to actually apply this as a child of the selected object, I can hold the Shift key down, and that'll automatically do two things. It'll make that bend deformer, or that object that I just created, a child of the object. And with deformers, it's actually going to set this bounding box to the bounding box of your object here. So you can see that size is right here. And by default, I think it's like 200 by 200 by 200. So we can even bring that back to where it was before. And you'll see that if we bend this now, it's actually going to be bending in the wrong direction. So how do we fix this? Well, we can do two things. We can say, okay, well, what direction do we want the bend deformer to be bending our object? And right now it's set to positive Y, or facing upwards. But we want to bend this kind of laying flat in the positive X. So what I'm going to do is hit positive X, and nothing's going to happen until we say fit to parent. And it'll do two things. It'll adjust the size to fit the bounding box of our object, and then it'll also lay the object and point the bending in the direction that we just defined in that positive X. So now, if we adjust this, you can see that we are bending in the correct way that we wanted to. Now let's talk about the mode here. And if I go and I select my bend deformer and move this to the right on the X-axis here, you can see that the only thing that's getting bent is the part of our capsule that's within the bounding box of the bend deformer. And this is very important because if I shrink this down like so, and you just want to bend this a little bit, and I can even like hit T for scale, shrink this up or down, and see what's happening here. Now, let's talk about these different modes. Limited is the default, and this is basically saying, like, you know, if this goes outside, if your object goes outside of this bounding box, it's just kind of go in the direction and kind of continue, but it's not going to get bent anymore. If we go to within box, something really weird happens in that the bending is not going to continue. It's actually just going to stop, and then the object's just going to go back to where it was initially. So if I turn off the bend deformer, you can see that part of the cap just goes back to where it was before. So it's going to bend and then just slice off the end there. And so typically I'm never using this within box, but one option I will use all the time is this unlimited. And what this unlimited does, let me turn on keep length here. Let me just bring this down a little bit. Let's actually make the capsule a little bit longer here. And so what you'll see is this unlimited, between the limited and unlimited, limited is going to have anything within the bounding box bend and then continue on, but it's not going to bend anything outside of the bounding box. But if you do unlimited, what that's going to do is going to continue that bending as if the bounding box continued on as well. Okay, so it's going to follow this arrow and keep bending up, and it's going to keep bending the opposite way as well. So this is very helpful in some instances. So that's really cool. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what happens if you don't have an object that is highly subdivided, because this happens all the time. And this is kind of a beginner mistake that a lot of people run into, is you might have an object that doesn't have a lot of subdivision. So let me show you another example here. Let's delete the capsule. Let's grab a cube, hit T for scale, and let's make this a little bit bigger. And let's actually just get a whole new bend deformer here, and I'll go and with that cube selected, I'll hold the Shift key down, add a bend. It'll apply that bend as a child, and you can see that it is fitting the bounding box of our cube. Now I'll go to hit bend, and you'll see that when I adjusted the bend strength, we just kind of sheared it. Now, why is that happening? Well, if you see with garage shading with lines, I got that active. There's no geometry, there's no segments between the top and the bottom of this bend, so we don't have enough like resolution there to make that bend. It's almost like if you had 2 points and you wanted to create a curve out of it in Illustrator, you need to create new points to get that kind of definition and resolution in that spline or that path to create that bending. It's the same thing with geometries where, you know, if we wanted to bend this upwards, and have a nice smooth bend curve, what we need to do is up the segments. And you'll see as I do that, it's kind of like adding new points to your spline or your path, and you're adding more points. You're allowing that bend to have more definition to it. So you can see how that works. Now this is very, very important. So sometimes you might need a bend and you might need to have, more subdivisions there as well. Let me just show you very quickly if we went and did, say, a twist. And so we can stack we can stack deformers on top of one another. So let's go to twist. And so this is very important as well. It's like effects stacks in, say, Photoshop or After Effects, in that the first deformer in the stack is going to act first, and then the second one is going to act as well. So if you wanted to twist first, and let's actually just fit to parent here, and we can twist this. You're going to twist, and then you're going to bend. Okay, so first you're going to bend, or first you're going to twist, and then you're going to bend. Now if we did this the other way around, we would actually bend first, and then twist that result after that bend happened. And you can see that looks very, very weird. And this might not be what you're expecting, and that's because the order of operations is just off. Okay, so depending on your deformer, you might need to add a little more definition in different areas, but not with these two. So if I wanted to have this bend here, and let's throw this in the subdivision surface here, and let's just bring down these segments here. So we got this nice little arm here, and I could just use a capsule again as well, but I'm just going to demonstrate with this cube. And let's just say we wanted to taper this arm down as well. So what I'm going to do is go into my deformers menu, and let's go to taper. And so with the taper, you can see that, and I didn't point this out with the twist. Let me just grab the twist again. You can see that the twist has this little twirly arrow, okay? And that tells you which direction that's going to twist in, which is very helpful. And all these deformers have these very helpful, gooey kind of things, these little HUD things. And so you can see that the arrows at the top are pinching in. So if we wanted to taper at the top, this is perfect. Or if we want to do the other way, we'd have to go to -y, fit to parent. And now you can see it's going to pinch downwards. Okay, so if we do this like this and do the strength, we can even go negative strength and kind of bulge it out. You can adjust the curvature here, and so you can do all this type of stuff. You can fillet or fillet of, if you want to call it fillet and do it wrong, but fillet is allows you to kind of make that a little bit wider, and so you can see this a little bit curvier. And so this is kind of what we can do. We can stack these two different things, but actually you would want to taper first and then bend that taper. So you can see the difference between the order of operations there. Okay, so very important. And so let's take this arm and we'll copy and paste this to our little CPU boy. But you can see that this is just very, very useful and helpful to be able to use deformers instead of modeling details. Like if we had that pigeon wing, we modeled that pigeon, and if you wanted to bend that wing, you wouldn't have to just select different polygons and stuff like that and move it around. You just use a bend deformer and bend it whatever way you want. It's non-destructive. You can turn these on and off. You're not actually doing anything to the original mesh, and so this is very handy. So let's copy the arm to the CPU boy project here. You can see it's very large, so let's hit T for scale this down. And what's very helpful with kind of doing this stuff in a separate project and then bringing this in is that we can rotate this into place here. So we got like the thicker upper arm, and it's a little bit less confusing to do that versus, okay, I'm going to put this cube in place and then add the taper and bend afterwards, which it's not very hard if you just remember that you can add a bend and you can add this a child of your cube. But again, you're gonna have to see like, okay, let's do fit to parent and then hope it's in the right direction. Yay, it is. So now you can have that bend. And then we can also go into here as well, add that taper, do the taper first. And let's actually turn off the bend, and we can do fit to parent. And luckily this is just in the right direction here as well. Actually, it's not. Let's go do that the opposite so we can kind of taper the top there, but we can also flail this out like so. Use that fillet, so something like that. And so you can see that this is a little bit more confusing when you place the object and then add the deformers. But as long as you know there's that fit to parent, and if things aren't looking good, you can also just kind of solo things as well and see like, okay, if this is in the Z fit to parent, this is just in the totally wrong direction. It's tapering, it's just doing a lot of weird stuff there. So it's always helpful to kind of diagnose what's going on, knowing where the arrows are going, knowing which direction you want this to go, because if not, you're gonna be clicking around wondering what direction's the right one. It's also helpful that you know which axis, when you rotate your object in a certain position and you want to bend a certain way. Like I know I want to bend on the y-axis. Make sure that the y-axis is selected on these deformers because they all have all these different alignments here, okay? So you can also move this up or down. Because again, this is limited. You can do unlimited as well. So just so many little options here. Let's get out of the solo here. So many little options with deformers, and we've only covered like 3 of them. There's a lot to cover, and we'll cover some more throughout this course, but again, always look at the help menu, dive in, experiment, explore, and yeah, just go right-click, show help, and you'll know all you need to know about all of the deformers. So right in this deformers object here, all the little pretty pictures, and even says what I just did where the deformers can act on an object as the same level as a hierarchy. So all of these objects are children of this null, or deformers can work upon an object as direct children to that object you want to deform. So if you ever forget, you can always look at the show help versus, coming back, seeing me rewinding and what did I say? So yeah, help is so useful. So are deformers, and so are so many other things in Cinema 4D that we will be talking about real soon.